keep the fire alive. If that light goes out, the things in the dark, the things in those woods, they'll take the darkness as an invitation to turn your campsite into a feast. Enjoy these disturbing camping stories in Diag. Also, like and share this video if you like what I do. It helps a lot. Now let's begin. I've had a few brushes with unexplainable things in my life, but only one of them felt like an actually dangerous situation. Growing up in Utah, it's impossible not to run into LDS members. Latter-day Saints, I mean. But they were friendly enough to my family. While I never really synced with religion at all in my life, I was an oddball and didn't have many friends. I was swayed to give it a shot as a kid when I was told about all the fun community activities they did together. I know now it was part of an effort to help convert new members, but when you live in Utah, you stand out pretty fast if you're not Mormon. We had just moved into the suburbs. My parents were mending their relationship from a long separation and thought it would be good to get more in touch with the neighbors. I didn't know anyone, of course, and was eager to make friends. Turned out there was a camping trip happening, and my mom thought it would be a perfect chance for me to make friends and to get to know everyone. I fit the age group criteria, and the kids my age also seemed interested to meet me, being the new kid and all. They divided their activities between boys and girls, so I'd be going to an all-girls camp. Girls from the ages of 11 to 17, along with their mothers, aunts, older sisters, or whatnot, who were the camp leaders in charge of organizing everything. I had been so excited that I remember waking up before daylight for the trip. I waited until my mother was awake, shoveled down my breakfast so she could hurry up and drop me off at the parking lot where they would be loading up everyone and everything. My mother chatted with a few women she had been making friends with as my stuff was loaded up. They were going over the details. My mother was entirely entrusting me in their care, as my sisters were both over 18, so they were too old for this trip, and they weren't amongst the organizers. I would basically be going alone, just with our friendly new neighbors. When the caravan of cars was packed up and ready to finally leave, I'd say there were about 35 of us in total. The morning was still just getting started, and the sun was just barely peeking over the mountains. The drive itself took at least 4 or so hours as we headed into the deeper mountains. When we finally arrived at the campsite, it was a massive campground property. I don't remember the name of it, but I can remember the layout like it was last week. We'd be staying in our own cabins. I learned there were 3 other church groups coordinating with us, and we'd be having competitions throughout our stay against them. Our campsite was the closest to the main hall and amphitheater. The other sites were scattered further down from us. Our cabin overlooked a field next to the bathroom and caught a glimpse of the lake a ways away. We could see 2 other campsites, but the third was buried behind the tree line. During the little assembly that went over the rules and responsibilities on staying on the campground, the owners then brought out this strange contraption. At first, it looked like a megaphone duct taped to a stick. It was basically that, with a car alarm and battery rigged into a PVC pipe, decorated with feathers and beads to make it look even more, well, ridiculous. They said it was their bear alarm. They explained that the nearby ranchers in the area have had a lot of livestock go missing or wind up dead. They suspected bears were the culprits. So they said if we ever heard the alarm go off, immediately head to the cabins and stay inside until things were clear. Throughout the day's camping, 2 cowboy men would ride in their horses and occasionally watch our activities or chat around with the adults. All of the groups took turns feeding them breakfast, lunch, and dinner to thank them and to also make sure all the girls wouldn't be scared or intimidated by them. As you'd expect, every night, whether we were around the fire or we were all tucked away in our bunks, we would share spooky stories. The younger girls were easiest to scare. The older girls liked to say that it wasn't really bears that were in the mountains that we should be afraid of, but something far worse. I rolled my eyes at this and dismissed the stories of Bigfoot, but it would also be the first time I heard about skinwalkers. While one girl was definitely trying to scare us, she claimed she overheard one of the cowboys that was over for breakfast talking with the adults about sheep that had been killed. The strange thing, he had said, was that they hadn't been eaten, but they were viciously butchered, left to rot in the sun. The cowboy was perplexed at why anything, bear or mountain lion or whatever, would just kill a poor creature for no reason, instead of hunting it for food. Looking back on this, I wonder if maybe the cowboy was exaggerating to get a chuckle and spook the guests with some exciting stories, or if that girl had made the whole thing up. But by then, we were all sure that we were not going to travel the area alone, and we would preferably stick to bigger groups of 3 or more. Now, we did have the luxury of a bathroom, but the entire camp had to share it. It was one little cabin with showers and stalls. The water was always ice cold, and the toilets reminded me of the creepy bathrooms from that one scene with the bees from Candyman. Each camp group was tasked with trading off by providing toilet paper for the day for the rest of the camp, but our camp was the only one generous enough to keep with it. During breakfast on one day, one of our camp leaders was frustrated, fuming for having to drive all the way down the canyon and back to bring back more toilet paper because the other camps would not leave the rolls at the bathrooms. They were instead taking them with them. Pretty soon, it devolved into a system. If you had to use the bathroom, you'd have to go to your camp, take a roll with you, and then bring it back. Our group felt the unfairness of it all, that the other camp groups weren't following the rules, and also inconveniencing everyone this way. So, our girls started plotting ways to get back at them. It started off with everyone gung-ho and fired up for revenge, but as the plans were to be put into motion, it fizzled out quick, and our volunteers no longer wanted to risk the trouble of being caught. So it came down to 3 of the eldest girls, the masterminds of the plan, and then just me. I'd gone into this trip hoping to make friends after all, so I wanted to prove myself somehow. Since our troops had dwindled down to the 4 of us, revisions were made. Turned out that a smaller group was far more suited to this anyway. One of the girls had brought with them some rubber Halloween masks to scare people during the night. We chose between a devil, a scarecrow, and a gorilla. We figured to capitalize on the bear scare paranoia the whole camp had going on. The gorilla mask was the best fit. Our plan was not only to steal back all the toilet paper from the other camps, but also scare them while they were in their cabins. We would be breaking curfew, but we already had the approval from one of the mischievous moms in charge of us. I guess the other one simply was turning a blind eye to our antics, especially since she was the one that had to make the trips down the canyon. To us, we'd be free from being reprimanded, as long as none of the other campers caught us. Now, I was both short for my age and not at all in shape, just fueled by determination. I was praised for being the only younger girl to stick with the plan for the attack, so I was feeling very confident about the whole thing. We had these cheap little flashlights with weak lights to guide us through the dark pathways. The forest surrounding us was pitch-black walls. You could only see up the first 2 or 3 rows of trees until it became an endless dark abyss. The night sky was clear and gave us a beautiful view of the stars, and the moon sometimes offered to help light our way in the openings. It added this eerie glow to things, but we appreciated the light for being enough, but also not being too much to give us away. As we approached the first cabin, we crouched down behind the overgrowth and got into position, trying to stifle our laughter. One girl put on the gorilla mask, let's call her Tina. Myself and another girl, named Ashley, grabbed the stacked toilet paper they had on one of the tables. We partially unzipped our hoodies and stuffed them as our makeshift bag to make carrying them easier. I watched the other 2 creep up to the windows, the one without the mask. Let's call her Kat. She got down on the ground to make herself into a makeshift step for the masked girl to boost onto. Tina then began to tap on the window, and soon we heard one scream, followed by a series of screams. I covered my mouth to hold in my laughter, but we still snickered, immediately taking off to hit the next campsite. The next camp went the same way, though our toilet paper haul wasn't much. That hardly mattered compared to the thrill of scaring all of our rival camp groups. The last camp was the furthest away of all of them, and took the longest to reach, of course. It was up a series of uneven up and down climbs and nestled very close to the forest edge. There were stacks of logs that looked to be sitting there for years, like they had planned to expand the campground, but suddenly stopped and abandoned all of their materials. The pathways weren't nearly as smooth. They were rocky and uneven, with tree roots acting as both stairs and obstacles. It wasn't as open as the other cabins were, and appeared much smaller too. It felt so much darker and cooler here. It was unnerving with how closed off it felt. Suddenly, Ashley, whom had been gathering and carrying the spoils with me, offered to take what toilet paper we had reclaimed back to the camp before the final scare. She reasoned we had plenty of toilet paper back, so getting it off our hands would make the clean getaway much more easy. I thought back on how Ashley had gotten progressively quiet throughout our scare rampage and didn't seem to be enjoying herself anymore. But we didn't fight her. We let her take some of what we were carrying to head back with. She also asked if I wanted to head back with her, but I wanted to see this to the very end, and I didn't want to call it quits, so I declined. We told her to be careful, and it wasn't until we were finally approaching the cabin that I realized she probably didn't want to go back alone. I suddenly felt guilty and stupid for putting my own wants before hers, but it seemed too late now to go back for her. I was certain I would blow our cover if I tried to leave at that point. After all, Ashley had the better flashlight and would take the paths back, so I reassured myself that she'd be fine. The last camp had the biggest stack of toilet paper, which was proof that they'd been the worst hoarders of all the groups. I couldn't even carry it all, even with Tina and Kat stuffing some into their hoodies. We had to go around to the back of the cabin to find their windows, which were small and located high up, but that positioned us right on the tree line. I remember standing there, awkwardly, and having the odd feeling that I shouldn't dare turn around. The air felt so cold. The sounds of the usual pleasant cricket chirps, the nightlife, even the calming trickle of the creek that roped itself throughout all the camps, seemed to be non-existent. It didn't feel as lively in this patch anymore, like it needed to be as quiet and unnoticeable as possible. I was thankful that we weren't the group staying in this particular cabin, yet, for a moment, I suddenly wished I'd taken the chance to go back with Ashley. Kat and Tina made their attempts to scratch at the window, and had no luck this time. We quietly whispered if they should try another window, or just bang on it. I wanted to say, hey, we had a good run, let's head back, but instead my eyes were looking back at the trees around us. I heard a hefty snap of branches or twigs within the trees, but it echoed in such a way that it was impossible to tell where it was coming from. The older girls finally decided to just rap on the window this time. They told me to get ready, to cut and run, that we'd cut through the trees and head for the small field our cabin overlooked, instead of following the path around to ensure we wouldn't get caught. It would be a long trip back, and the other camps were probably looking for the pranksters already. We'd be making a straight shot back to the cabin instead of following the trails. I didn't even consider the risks or even dangers of ignoring the paths, because I liked the idea of getting away from this cabin even more. This time, Kat had the mask on, so she pounded on the thick window glass, and a series of yelps soon was heard. Then someone shined a flashlight on our makeshift monster. Then there was a series of screams. Kat dropped from her friend. Tina stood up, not even dusting herself off before we all took off. Both were extremely athletic. Kat was on soccer and basketball teams, and Tina was a cheerleader, so they easily sprinted ahead as I struggled to keep up. But at least thanks to just following them, running through the trees ended up not being as bad as you'd think, especially when you're forced to block out everything around you and focus on the next person ahead of you. When we made it to the field, we crouched down to get our bearings. They were laughing as I caught up to them. We relished in our victory for a moment, high fives all around, as we made a quick pace back to our camp. But then, in the distance, we heard the bear alarm. It was a high-pitched car alarm you'd hear anywhere, but in the middle of the woods. It sounded horrifying, echoing through the wilderness. We all froze and looked at each other. Maybe We had been mistaken for the supposed bear and triggered the alarm. Or was it real? We didn't stop to chat it over, and immediately the two girls took off without another thought. On top of being unable to keep up with them properly, I was also carrying the biggest load of toilet paper, as well as an awkwardly studded hoodie. I was trying not to drop everything so that our efforts wouldn't be wasted. Not to mention the tall grass and the bumpy ground had me nearly hopping each step. The two of them quickly lengthened the distance on me and left me behind. I heard shouting in the distance, and I could see bright lights from flashlights waving around at the trees. I was terrified of being caught by anything, and also overwhelmed by the thought that I was the easiest target to chase after. I was awkward, slow. The other two were leaving me in their dust. My lungs were burning, trying to keep up a good pace. Jay and Tina were already up an incline towards the cab, while I was still approaching it. I looked around me, wondering if I'd be better off running on the more even trail than trying to fight my way through the tall grass and bushes, as well as the steep incline. I stumbled and tripped several times. At that point, I was more panicked and not caring if I dropped anything. But the twinge I felt in my ankle from a fall convinced me I wouldn't make it up the hill easily in my circumstances. It was tempting to look over my shoulder. My senses were screaming at me to do it. To reassure myself, I was freaking out over nothing. I was immediately convinced that I had to move faster, as if something was behind me, chasing me. However, I was also torn by fear to do no such thing. Don't do it. You'll see something awful. You'll regret it. What if I turned around and confirmed it? I mean, if I did actually see something, I'd probably panic and fall over, and that'd be it for me. Don't look back. I tried to think as I ran, hobbling in my steps, trying not to stumble every time. Don't look back. Then again, the pressure was getting to me fast. My breath was far too frantic and fear was taking over. Maybe I could get it all to stop if I turned around and saw that nothing was there. So I finally decided. I turned my head to look back anyway. I was just going to twist to look over my shoulder for a second, but then all the hairs on my neck and arms stood up. It was like something had slid up my spine and changed the entire atmosphere around me. Then I heard a loud crack from behind me in the distance. At first it sounded like a tree had snapped, but then I recalled another noise I'd been introduced to not days before, when we had a contest over what camp team could shoot the most clay pigeons out of the sky. It was a gunshot. No hill or mountain was going to impede me. I didn't look back and just barreled up that hill like my life depended on it. When I made it to the top, I saw the two other girls already across the way and nearing the cabin. I ran diagonally to get in the smoother path again. I could feel every rock embedded in the dirt trying to poke through the soles of my sneakers, but I didn't care. The bulk of toilet paper I was carrying swayed. It was surprising I didn't just ditch all of it on the ground upon hearing that gunshot. When I made it to the cab, they were waiting at the door, waving at me to just get in the cabin. I finally dumped the haul of toilet paper on the ground and rested on my knees to catch my breath. Ashley had made it back just fine. She was already snuggled up in her sleeping bag, yet she wouldn't leave it to join the rest of us. Some of her friends had to go over to her, so she wasn't sitting alone. I had no idea how her walk alone went. We sat in the cabin, hearing the blaring alarm outside, with the other shouts and commotion. For some reason, my mind kept focusing on the moment where I almost turned around and the unease within those trees before a cat banged on the window. That night, we weren't alone in the dark woods. There was something with us in the camp that night, something that could have been the same thing the cowboys were looking for. The thing they suspected wasn't a bear at all. That was years ago. I still wonder what they were shooting at, what they were shouting at, what they were chasing, and what may have been chasing me. If you're thinking they were shooting at me, assuming that I was the bear or something, this shot was much more distant, and I would have been in plain sight as I entered the door, so they would have seen it was a person. But still, even after I entered the cabin, the commotion only worsened. The adults never did directly tell us what happened exactly that night. We thought it'd be the talk of the camp the following day, but everyone just stayed quiet, as if it never happened, We never got a scolding lecture at the assembly about not following curfew. All in all, no one cared about our prank. No one talked about our prank because there was something about the previous night that no one wanted to talk about. But it does seem fitting that we pranksters ended up getting the worst scare of all, because maybe whatever it was that was there that night didn't care for imposters. This story happened the summer I turned 11. My grandparents on my mom's side used to be outfitters. These are people who take clients on trips in national parks. My grandparents had let me and one of my little sisters come along with them. They were taking a family, a mom, dad, 2 kids, and a grandma. We rode out to our destination on horses and soon set up camp. We were a few days into the pack trip, and my grandpa was going to take us on a day ride where we would ride around for the day. So we'd all gotten our horses wrangled and saddled. He was going to take us around some old wolf dens. Then we'd eat lunch at the top of this ridge. Now let me say this. When I was younger, I always liked to ride in the very back of the pack string. So riding in front of me was one of our wranglers named Sarah. As we were riding to the top of the ridge, I kept hearing the sound of a little girl whispering in my ear. Obviously, this freaked me out a bit, so I asked Sarah to ride behind me instead. We got to the top of the ridge and began to eat lunch. When we got back to camp, we let our horses loose after unsaddling them. As I was playing around in the trees with my sister and the 2 other kids, I could hear men whispering and talking. It didn't sound like my grandpa or the kids' dad, so I thought that was a little weird. After that, I walked over to my grandma and told her what happened. She told me that's common here. The place was said to be haunted, as it was a place where soldiers back in the 1800s would stay and wrangle their horses. The cavalry used to stay there, so that's why it's named Soldiers' Corral. Even to this day, it still haunts me to know that I could have been hearing spirits. The whispers of those who perished long ago, those who were forgotten by time. The college I went to in Minnesota is very close to the Boundary Waters. It's a huge forested area where no roads or motorized vehicles are allowed. I'm training to be a DNR. It's a nature police officer. For one of their tests, we have to take a 2-day search and rescue out in the Boundary Waters and look for our rescue victim. The day we began the test, we were hearing sticks snapping and whistling sounds. One girl in my group even swore she saw a deer standing on 2 legs in the distance, which we thought was odd. The night we stayed there was even worse. I woke up to the sound of an animal sniffing around our tents. I thought it was a black bear or a wolf sniffing for food lying around. Many of us weren't scared because we all were carrying guns with us. In the morning, there were weird footsteps around the camp. I could make out deer and wolf prints mainly. I didn't think anything unusual at first. Animals just passing through were being tracked by other animals. We found the dummy that was our rescue person, and it was covered in scratch marks. But once again, we all pushed this off. Maybe it was just raccoons being curious. We began our hike back to the ATVs, but something was following the group. Something big. We could hear it following behind us, heavy and easily noticed. It wasn't even trying to hide itself. But as quickly as the noises began, they were gone. After those awkward and unsettling couple of days, we went back to campus. The dorm sat by the woods, and my window points out in the direction of them. One night, I looked out the window, and on the edge of the woods were these 2 big, bright yellow eyes, and they were looking directly at me. I froze when I saw it, trying my hardest to think of the animal that could be. My friend saw me and looked out the window too. She screamed as soon as she saw it. What she yelled, I guess it didn't surprise me, but it shocked me. She was Native American, and I believe she would know a thing or two about these things. What she yelled was Wendigo. She shoved me away from the window, shut all the blinds, and locked everything. That night, she did some chanting and blessings over the dorm. I thought it was weird, but deep down, I was actually scared. For the next few days, I did not see the eyes. Around campus, though, more and more dead animals began to just show up, nasty and half-rotten. My native friend continued to freak out, claiming that it was a Wendigo, but no one really believed her. Rumors were going around saying they keep seeing weird animals at night walking around the campus. One person even said they heard a horrible scream that kept them up all night. This whole Wendigo thing lasted about 2 weeks. The last night before it all finally stopped was actually the worst night of my life. I was sleeping, and I had been awakened by tapping on the window. I turned over and just ignored it, trying to go back to sleep, but the tapping grew louder. I soon became annoyed, so I yelled at it to go away. I was thinking it was someone drunk and trying to annoy me, so I wasn't expecting what happened next. Someone outside, someone who sounded like my mother, spoke. "Megan, come on, open the window. Let me in. It's cold out here." She finished with a creepy laugh. I don't know why, but I decided to get up, grabbing my gun, and I opened my blinds. There it was, outside my window, looking down, smiling at me with these sharp teeth and bright yellow eyes. It's hard to describe what it looked like half-rotten deer, half-sickly, pale human being. It called me again, asking me to open the window in my mother's voice. I quickly pointed my pistol at it, and its smile disappeared. Then the thing screamed. Oh God, that horrible scream hurt my ears. I couldn't think at all. I shot. Not sure if I hit it, but it did let out another scream and ran away. Everyone in the dorm woke up, freaking out and coming to my room. There was a small bullet hole in the window, and the dean of the college was not very happy with me. But I explained that a wild animal had come to the window, trying to get in, and I feared for my life. The dean believed me, considering all the weird occurrences going around. I'm just glad that thing hasn't shown up again. I think it followed us from the Boundary Waters. Everything has gone back to normal now, but I hope I don't see it again. My Native American friend switched colleges soon after. She was so scared that it would come back. It's been over a year and no signs yet, so let's just hope that's the end of it. It was the early summer of my senior year of high school. I had just turned 17, and my girlfriend Julie and I had planned a camping trip with some of our friends to celebrate. We were going to be spending the night on Silver Star Mountain, a short drive of where we all lived. We started the day by packing all of the food and cooking materials into my friend's minivan. Then we drove over to pick up the 4 friends that would be joining us: James, Marco, Ferris, and Sophia. They all pushed their large backpacks into the van, and we were on our way. After about an hour's drive on the highway and another 45 minutes on a narrow dirt road, we made it to the remote trailhead. At this point, it was in the mid-afternoon, which was a bit later than we had intended to arrive, due to a much-needed river swim we had taken on the drive up. We quickly started our ascent, and soon realized this hike was going to be much harder than we anticipated. While we were all very experienced hikers, we had not prepared for how steep the trail was going to be. No matter, we pushed on, and after 2 hours of straight uphill climb, we came to a juncture on the trail that was not on the map. After a bit of deliberation, it was decided that I would run up one of the trails and attempt to decipher if it was the right path. I dropped my pack and started to jog up the trail, watching my friends slowly disappear behind me. After a few minutes, I came to the conclusion that this trail was the wrong way. It was a dead end. I had stopped in a small clearing with tall bushes looming above me. I was catching my breath when I noticed that a spot in the grass had been flattened, likely by a large deer or a goat. Just then, I heard a rustling to my right. It was in the foliage. I could tell that a reasonably large animal was running off into the woods. After that, I was left in utter and unnatural silence. It was time to get going back to my friends. I ran down the trail, putting the unusual experience out of my mind. We all picked up our bags when I made it back and resumed our hike, eventually making it to the top of the mountain around 6 p.m. For an avid hiker, I can say I've seen some extremely beautiful views, but the top of this mountain was the most impressive. It had a 360-degree view of the horizon all around us, with forests stretching as far as the eye could see. The place where we were setting up camp was on the peak of the mountain, surrounded by sheer rocky drop-offs. Once we saw the sun slowly creeping towards the horizon, we put up our tents and hammocks. After a period of time, we were able to build a fire in the stinging cold wind. We ate dinner, and then James, Sophia, Ferris, and Marco went off to smoke a joint on the cliff edge. Jolie and I had decided to stay sober the whole trip. We wanted to fully experience everything here: the sun finally set, allowing us to see the most beautiful sunset of my life. James, Sophia, Ferris, and Marco crawled into their hammocks, which were about 100 feet from the tent that Jolie and I were sharing. After a while of shivering in the cold, I drifted off to sleep with my girlfriend in my arms. I woke up in the middle of the night. I grabbed my phone and looked at it to see that it was 3 a.m. I nestled back into my sleeping bag and closed my eyes when I realized why I had woken up. There was a faint cry in the distance, a woman's cry, but I soon realized that it sounded more like a man's whimpering somewhere just outside the tent. I immediately assumed it was James. It was only his second time smoking weed, and for some reason I thought he may have been having a bad trip. Without thinking, I left Jolie in the tent to go help James out and make sure he was okay. I followed the soft crying to the edge of one of the surrounding cliffs, and I looked down over the edge. I saw a figure crouched into an outcropping on the cliff face. He appeared to be weeping. "James," I yelled out. "Hey, everything all right?" I was still assuming it was him, but there was no reply. Then I decided to do something that I wish I never had. I began to descend the cliff to help him. After about 30 seconds of shuffling down the cliff, I looked again down toward the figure. I noticed that James was not wearing his clothes. How did I not notice that before? I continued to crawl down towards him when he slowly looked up towards me. I was filled with a thickening dread that sunk into the core of my being when I noticed this was not James. Instead, it was some strange skinny man curled into a ball. Tears were flowing down his face, and there was a large rock being held in his hands. I watched in horror as he raised the rock with his right hand and quickly brought it down onto his left hand, smashing his fingers. He then let out a deeply pained groan, but he continued to do it, over and over, destroying his hand. He then lifted up what remained of his appendage, as if to show me what he had done. I had already frozen up, completely terrified of the man 10 feet in front of me. He took a short, crouched step towards me, still holding what remained of his hand. I began to climb back up the cliff in a panic, kicking rocks and dirt down behind me. Another painful groan was released from the man's mouth. I looked back to see the man, who was now uninterested in me, continuing to smash his hand to bits. With that, I reached the top of the cliff and yelled for everyone to wake up. I ran towards where everyone was and told them that there was some crazy man on the mountain with us and that we needed to leave. They must have seen the look in my eye because they knew I was not joking. We all began to quickly pack our things when we all began to hear the animalistic screams of pain, followed by the sounds of rocks tumbling down the mountain. With that, we grabbed our bags and ran down the trail, leaving our hammocks and tent behind. No one spoke on the hike down, and every so often we could hear his cries in the distance. As we descended down the steep trail, after an hour we could no longer hear the cries, but still none of us spoke. Eventually, we got to our van and discovered the left rear window had been completely shattered, with bits of glass hanging off. We quickly piled into the car and drove off, where I recounted to all of them what had happened on the cliff. Despite how disturbed we all felt lucky to be alive, and eventually started making some jokes about how ridiculous it all was. Once we had cell phone service, I called the police and told them what had happened. To my surprise, they took the case very seriously. They did not find a man on that mountain, but they did find a great deal of blood on the cliff face, the very same spot where the man had been. It is now 2 years later, and we all are planning on camping up on the mountain again to prove that we can do it. Despite the excitement that is going along with it, I can't help but feel that this is a very bad idea. So if you like these stories, then hit the like button, press the notification bell, and subscribe for more spine-tingling content. And we will see you in the next story.